All right, opening day is a day away, and right now we're going to talk baseball with the Hall of Famer Eric Nadel. And Eric, it's been fun getting back on the air the last two nights, and tomorrow we finally get to get back on the air in a game that counts towards something. Uh, but before we get to the actual game and the roster construction, yesterday we got to take a tour of Globe Life Field and maybe got to see things that we had not seen before. So I'm curious, what stood out to you about the tour, and then just generally speaking from a baseball standpoint, what stands out to you about the field and the way it plays?
I'm blown away really every time I go into that building at how good the sightlines are. You know, it's so unfortunate we can't have fans there this year to appreciate how good the seats are. I think there are far more really good seats because of the incline being steeper than in the old ballpark. People are really going to appreciate that when they get in there. Also, the sound system is a million times better. Walking around the concourse, it's nice to see, the tributes to Ranger history. There are multiple concourses, so not everything's on the main concourse the way it is, in other ballparks. People really should take court. We realized yesterday how much is going on that's not readily evident. You could just come in and walk the main concourse. But in terms of how it's going to affect the game, I think it's going to be gigantic. The old ballpark was a hitter's park in so many ways, starting with the wind and the fact that the ball jumped off the bat almost every night. You would see a home run where you would question whether the guy really hit it well enough, to be a home run. I don't think that's going to happen in this ballpark. We haven't seen it yet in either the intra-squad games or the two exhibition games. The only home run that you might say was a cheap home run was the one that Todd Frazier hit last night, but he hit it in the right place. He hit it in any ballpark. If you hit it 330, but you hit it right down the line, it's going to be a home run. But there hasn't been anything hit to center or to the alleys that got caught in any jet stream or anything like that. I think the turf, although the players are saying it's playing pretty fast, is not going to play as fast as the infield did in the old park. The dirt is certainly not going to be baked rock hard by the fifth inning the way it was in the other park, so that a hitter would hit a ball straight down and it would wind up being a hit instead of an easy ground ball out as it should. So I think that's one of the new aspects of this park that maybe is being underestimated a little bit. So I think it's going to be, I wouldn't say it's going to be necessarily a pitcher's park, but I think it's going to be at least a fair park. It's definitely not going to be, a launching pad or a hitter's park.
All right, so yesterday, I guess the big news was not the 7-3 loss to the Rockies, but it was the rounding out of the 30-man roster. We're going to get to that in a second. Maybe this has to do with that, maybe not. You're the artist, paint away. What ballpark aside, what really interests you as we get set to start the season when it comes to this Rangers team?
You start with Kiner Falefa, I think. He forced the Rangers to alter their plans at first by coming into spring training and then into summer camp and hitting his way onto the team. We know he's a stellar defender at third base, and having him over there is a big factor, forcing Frazier to move over to first, but he's got to hit. Having that great defense at third base is not enough. He's going to have to keep hitting the way he's done in these exhibition games. And if he's able to do that, I think the Rangers overall are a much stronger team. So that's one of the things that's most interesting to me. Obviously, whether or not Odor can carry over what he did in the spring and what he's done in July is very important given the short season, the 60-game season. So in terms of the Ranger lineup, I think those are the two things that interest me the most. When you look at the pitching staff, I think the question is, how much will that new Ranger rotation play as well as they think in the short season? Definitely it would have been an advantage for the Rangers in a 162-game season. Given a 60-game season where you can probably go to your bullpen more often without worrying about wearing out your relievers, maybe it's not as much of a factor. But if Lynn and Minor and Kluber pitch the way they've pitched at their best in the past, that is going to be a very big factor. Then how the bullpen is going to set up, missing 3 of the top 5 relievers on the team, probably with Brett Martin and Rafael Montero. and Joely Rodriguez all out, it's pretty much a reconstructed bullpen that's depending a lot on not that familiar with.
All right, Eric. So let's start with the lineup. You brought up Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. You brought up Rugi. What those guys have in common is what a lot of guys in this lineup have in common, and that's not having a 3 to 4 year track record where you can go into a season and realistically expect a certain level of production. And in comparison to the Rockies, who, you know, you look at their lineup, Trevor Story, Charlie Blackmon, Nolan Arenado, these guys have been doing it. So it's fair to go into the season, even though anything could happen, but expecting big things. And I think that's why this Rangers lineup is so tough to gauge, because even a guy like Joey Gallo, the big step he took last year, it's only been 1 year. Shin-Soo Choo is a guy who has done it year in, year out, but he's, you know, getting close to 40. You know, as excited as we are about Nick Solak and Willie Calhoun, they've not done anything over 162 games to prove that they are who we think they might be. So I think it's intriguing. It makes the range of what our expectation is for this lineup to be quite wide. But when you look at all these guys who do not have a track record, including the number 3 hitter, Danny Santana, it's not like he's done this year in, year out. What do you make of the lineup in general? Like, what's the upside, and maybe what are the concerns?
Well, there's a lot of upside, but I think you can say that about every lineup. I think one of the big concerns is making sure that Gallo gets pitches to hit. You know, Gallo's the key to this lineup. You know, when Gallo went down last year, it pretty much eliminated the chance of the Rangers staying in playoff contention. It took a little while. You know, they played pretty well at the beginning without him, but eventually the absence of Gallo from the lineup was absolutely devastating. So Rugi's got to hit well enough, you know, to protect him. I assume that when the other team throws a lefty, Todd Frazier will probably hit behind Gallo. Those guys have to hit well enough to make sure that Joey gets pitches to hit. I think that's something that, you know, hasn't been talked about enough as you look at what the Rangers lineup is, because there are so many questions up and down the lineup. But there are a lot of guys, like you say, who last year performed at a really elite level, including Calhoun for his half a season and Santana once he got in there. And if they duplicate that, you know, this is a very deep batting order. But, you know, everybody's got to do that, and it usually doesn't happen that way, you know, where you click on all those cylinders.
All right, now the bullpen. We talked about no Joely, no Brett Martin, no Rafael Montero, and then the first 2 of those guys are lefties. And I think one of the notable omissions from the bullpen was Taylor Hearn. Instead, the Rangers decided to go with 2 traditional starters who are lefties in Palumbo and Allard. But just because you're a lefty doesn't mean, you know, you're a lock to be the guy to get lefties out. So first time, you know, Charlie Blackmon is looming in a tough spot, you know, this weekend. Who's the lefty that you think they go to first? Unless, you know, not a guy like Leclerc, you know, not in the 9th inning, but if they need a guy and the decision is, we need someone who can get this really tough lefty out, who are they going to?
I think they'll go to either Chavez or Volquez. It's hard for me to imagine they're going to wheel Joe Palumbo into a situation like that right off the bat. Maybe they will, and there are going to be situations like that. The Rockies are a heavily left-handed hitting lineup. You know, the other night they started 7 left-handed batters. You know, only 2 righties. I think Story and Arenado were the only 2 righties in there. But keep in mind, you know, that teams have deeper benches. They have more pinch hitters. So I think that may be one of the reasons the Rangers didn't take a Taylor Hearn or a Wes Benjamin, who maybe would have been better suited for a left-on-left matchup. Because if you're facing, you know, one of those lesser left-handed hitters, they're going to pinch hit for him with a righty anyway, and then you're stuck with that guy facing 3 batters. And I think that is another big reason that the Rangers, you know, are probably going to entrust Volquez and Chavez with those situations more than they would the rookies Palumbo or Allard.
Jonathan Hernandez has been really impressive, and he gets talked about a ton. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa had a really good camp. He's gotten talked about a ton. Anyone else who has really impressed you that maybe isn't getting as much publicity as those two guys?
Well, Jose Trevino got a lot of publicity for his improved offensive prowess, and I think he's definitely worth mentioning in this regard. But other than that, this was such an odd training camp period, and for so long, the pitchers were clearly way ahead of the hitters. Chris Woodward says he thinks the hitters, for the most part, have caught up. There are exceptions, the guys who haven't played all along, like Gallo and Calhoun and Chirinos, will probably be behind in terms of their timing. But really, when you think about it, the only other guy I think who has really stood out offensively with sustained exposure is Scott Heineman. I think, who was somewhat surprising in how good his offense was. And then Leody Taveras, who hasn't played as much, but who certainly made enough of a splash to make the ball club, even if it's only going to be primarily as a pinch runner and a defensive replacement in the outfield.
All right, any final thoughts as we get ready to kick off the 2020 season?
I'm excited to play. These two exhibition games that we did were fun to do. And, there was a total lack of the crowd simulator. But I think that once the games start meaning something, the whole atmosphere in there is going to change, even without fans. I think everybody, who's doing a job in there will have a different level of intensity come tomorrow. And I'll be curious to see that, given that we're doing it without an actual crowd there.
Last thing, Eric, I've won the home run competition back-to-back years that we do. Is someone going to dethrone me? A 60-game season, so it doesn't allow me the same opportunity to separate myself.
Well, I mean, you clearly have help, from that Russian organization, and there's nothing we can do about it. You seem to be able to infiltrate the sort of information that we're unable to access. So it's probably hopeless.
Eric, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Can't wait for the first real game broadcast of the 2020 season.
Thanks. Let's slap those masks on and go get it.